What exactly is the president pitching right now to the American public?
Right. We're expecting to hear from him literally any minute there in Dearborn, Michigan. He just toured a F-150 plant. And this is a moment for the president where he sees that the unemployment rate was announced at 4.4%. It ticked down from 4.5% last month. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics just earlier this morning released new inflation rate data showing that it's at 2.7%. It has cooled. It is still above that 2% threshold that the Fed would like to see, but it calls into question whether the Fed and Jerome Powell will push to reduce interest rates, understanding that some of these numbers that are coming in are suggesting that the economy is at least more or less stabilizing. But for the president, he, of course, on his way here to Detroit, told cameras that he wants Jerome Powell to lower interest rates. And you can see that he is now just taken the stage there in Detroit, talking about the economy. But then for the president, he's also pushing forward this a potential cap of 10% on credit card interest rates, which was met with support by Elizabeth Warren, who said she received a direct phone call from the president himself yesterday. There are other Republicans that have been very vocal over the last 24 hours criticizing such a proposal, including the banks, saying that it would lower the credit available to lower-income Americans who rely on credit. But at the same time, it is an effort by this president to suggest that he is trying to address affordability at a time in which, really, frankly, he is using his executive powers beyond even what is legally questionable. And this is another moment where we heard the president on this 10% credit card interest rate cap suggest that it would be a violation of law if the banks don't follow suit, when, of course, it's not even law. So there's a lot of questions about exactly what the president can do economically here while he is in Michigan.
Yeah, so let's talk about the details here. There's the economic fixes like the credit card interest rates. Elizabeth Warren is on board with that. Banning large investors from buying single-family homes. He's also talking about getting rid of capital gains taxes for anybody who's selling a home to a first-time buyer. Are these things that he can achieve? I mean, we have on the graphic a number of other things. Are these achievable?
No, well, I mean, he certainly doesn't have the power to cap interest rates on credit cards.
That would
require legislation. Yeah, as would changing the capital gains rate for houses, which for a couple that's owned a house for longer than a year, the exclusion on capital gains is $500,000. Yeah. So if you make $500,000, you don't pay capital gains tax anyway. So you'd have to make considerably more than that for it to be meaningful, and then it's a smaller than ordinary income taxes. But the president doesn't have unilateral power on any of these issues. The one thing that he can do was instruct Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy mortgage bonds, which presumably reduces mortgage rates in a technical way, and that may make houses more affordable. But we still have a huge shortage of houses, and we still have high prices in the housing sector that the president can't do much about.
But you also have the head of these financial institutions, including Jamie Dimon, warning that rates are going to go up if he keeps attacking the Fed. So
absolutely.
How does that make sense?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, attacking the Fed, and this is, Katie, I've looked at this up and I've researched this. In the 113-year history of the Federal Reserve, we have never seen, first, a president publicly rebuke a Fed chair the way in which Donald Trump has.
I mean, they've gone into fights before presidents and Fed chairs. Yes, definitely. I mean, there's a great detail about one president, I think, like screaming at a Fed chair on the streets in Manhattan because he was so unhappy with him. This was the one that ended up becoming independent despite the president's wishes.
Oh, so that was in Truman was very much
Truman
during the Korean War. There was a big inflation that was going on. Truman wanted the Fed to cap rates.
My point is there has been tension between presidents and the Fed before. That is not new.
That's not new. But this constant, drumbeat of harassing Jay Powell is new, and now accusing him of criminal activity in front of the Senate is absolutely new and coercive. And Jay Powell's response: we've never seen a Fed chair publicly rebuke a sitting president and say that this was a pretext for a political decision to lower interest rates as opposed to an economic one. So we're in brand new territory here. We've not seen this before. And it's dangerous because we know what the outcome of politicizing a central bank is.
Why would politicizing a central bank potentially lead to higher mortgage rates or higher interest rates and not lower interest rates?
So if the Federal Reserve were to lower interest rates too much and the economy were to take off and inflation would accelerate, long-term interest rates on which mortgage rates are based would rise, because if inflation goes up, long-term rates go up. And so when you politicize the Fed, and we've seen this in Turkey, we've seen this in Argentina, we've seen it in Greece, we've seen it in a whole host of countries that have made interest rate decisions based on political expediency as opposed to economic reality.
Is this just a short-term fix for the president? Does he maybe not care what happens 5, 10 years from now?
Well, given that the credit card the rate cap is for 1 year, given that his nobbling of the Fed would ultimately result in a new chairman come May, and he's got 2 years left after that. Yeah, I mean, it's all short-term stuff. It doesn't, and it may or may not work. I mean, it may hurt the economy more than it helps. So I think he's working at cross purposes with himself. He's not going to help himself economically by having the Fed push interest rates below the inflation rate. He wants rates down at 1%. There's absolutely no justification for that.
The stickiest part of the economy right now, or costs, are groceries. People are really unhappy with the price of groceries. You hear about it everywhere, Michael Steele. The price of beef has just gone up a ton, and people are uncomfortable. They don't have that extra cash to spend. There's new polling out of Michigan that says that, broadly speaking, Michiganders are not happy with the president's economy. A plurality of them are giving him an F right now. Michigan was so important in 2016. It was important again in 2024. If Michiganders feel this way, Michael, how much concern should the president have about his party in November?
Well, starting with the fact that the president doesn't give a damn about the party.
Does he not, though? Does he not want to see a Republican? Doesn't he want to see a Republican-led Congress who doesn't have to deal with Democrats?
But that's not the same as the party. Those are individual members elected within the party. So there is not a broad concern about the philosophical and policy orientation of the party. What do Republicans stand for? What case do they make to the American people on health care, on the economy, on all those things that at the end of it, Katie, is affordability. Can I afford my health care? Right now, the answer is no. Can I afford my personal economy? Right now, the answer is no. So this is the reality that's being borne out in the polling. The question, I think, more appropriately is how does this translate to Republicans holding the House? What does it mean for Republicans in the Senate now? Because the Senate, no one wants to say it, but it is in play. And it is in play because of the policies that this administration has put forth that have had an impact. Now you have layered on top of the affordability question, the visuals of what's happening to American citizens as a result of ICE policy and what impact that's having. So all of these things are converging, which is why you're beginning to see a movement because, oh, guess what? It's a political year. That means Republicans are now on the ballot. And so you're going to see this hedging in the primary season because they don't want the right flank to come up and rise against them. But they know when they get into a general election mode, they've got to make a case that they don't want to have to make because Donald Trump is already making it for them. And so that's reflected in this polling as well. So you see a lot of Republicans in a very ticklish spot trying to navigate what Donald Trump is saying. Yeah, we like the idea of a 10% cap on credit cards, but what does that really mean for people? And if it's only for 1 year, so the next year I'm back at a 24% rate or 30% rate. So people aren't stupid. So these gimmicks may have worked in the past. I think it's going to be a harder case to make for them to work going forward.
Well, no taxes on tips certainly worked for him in the presidential election. He's complaining about
that was 4 years ago.
Yeah. Well, it was a year ago. It was a year ago.
Well, it's a life. But my point is that's my point. It's a lifetime. It might as well be 4 years ago because that's not my economy today.
Do they feel the president? I mean, he's been talking a lot about foreign policy, talking a lot about Iran, about Venezuela, about Greenland. Do you get the sense that this White House is trying to get him back on message domestically and that he just doesn't care, Michael?
And I don't think it's a question of not caring necessarily in that sense. I think it's what is his priority? What is it where Donald Trump sees that he gets the biggest economic or political benefit for him? And that's, if I can gin up the base on Venezuela and Greenland, that helps offset any noise around affordability and the economy. Oh, but now there's noise around Greenland and Venezuela. So let's sort of gin up some support around some economic issues on affordability. And so he is ping-ponging back and forth on these issues. Again, he's not, as the titular head of the Republican Party, he's not giving Republicans policy that they can sink their teeth into and make the case to the American people.
So in 2016, when I was following Trump around, 2015 and 2016, the campaign was adamant that they were going to win Michigan on just this one theme alone: jobs, jobs, jobs. That's all Michiganders cared about. And at the time, it was seen as just insane. It was the blue wall. No way Michigan was going to fall. Michigan right now is in an interesting spot because there's a lot of automation that's being introduced into the market, and a lot of automation that might affect auto companies. In a state that is so reliant on the auto industry, has this administration given, from what you can tell, a lot of thought about what AI might do to the jobs market?
Not that we can tell. I mean, robotics are going to be a very big feature of, auto manufacturing going forward. And you also have artificial intelligence being a component of that. And we've cut off the electric vehicle industry where we're no longer remotely competitive with China, which is now producing more EVs than anyone else in the world. So that the traditional auto business is kind of stuck doing internal combustion engine products, gasoline-powered cars. And whether or not that has a long-term future is an open question. It might here in the United States, but not in the rest of the world. So they've not given much thought to anything when it comes to policy. The tariffs don't help manufacturing. We've lost manufacturing jobs for 8 straight months. The total number of jobs created in 2025 is the weakest since 2003. It's the only other year in which there was not a recession and we had such weak job growth. So this is hardly a golden age. It's hardly focused on manufacturing. It's hardly focused on those states that are reliant on producing consumer goods. So the administration is really economically missing the mark. And with respect to what Michael said about foreign policy, I don't know how much that's going to help the president when it comes to states like this, who really don't want to hear about Venezuela, Greenland, and probably maybe not Iran, because oil prices today are up on his comments with respect to that.